mourning for the victims of the attacks. Parliament has also passed a law for the recruitment of local volunteers to fight against the armed groups. Burkina Faso has seen frequent attacks by armed groups since 2015, when violence started to spread across the Sahel region. Islamist groups with links to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State have in the past carried out attacks against civilian and military targets in the country. In December, 35 civilians, mostly women, were killed in an attack. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, for more, we are now joined in Lagos by Roy Okidiefbie, a security consultant and retired military officer. Thank you very much for joining us. The Burkina Faso government is considering having a civilian volunteer force to fight militants. What's your take on this, and how is it supposed to work?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for pronouncing that name very well. You see, it is not news that there is paucity of military and police personnel in the civilian space and in containing the crisis that we face in Africa, in African countries. It is not news also that we have corruption and misappropriation of funds bedeviling our security agencies. You know, so definitely you will need collaboration by civilian support, civilian complementary men. But one thing that I would advise for Burkina Faso is that they should look towards creating structure. They should embrace continuity in all their plans in engaging civilian joint task force, you know, and they should look at also transferring such persons into the regular services, either the police or the army. So when you have continuity, it tends to be a structure. And you must also impute training for, because most of their jobs will be technology-driven, information gathering and intelligence sharing. So if you want it to be local, then it will not be able to meet the speed and timing that is acceptable to such crisis situation.
Well, this has been done before. Let's take Nigeria's example, which has tried this approach of using vigilante groups to fight militants. What has been the impact on the ground there?
Well, for Nigeria, you know, most things that come on board, new ideas, bright ideas, it takes a lot of, it gets successes, you know, but most of the time you see it relapse, and because of care, because of motivation, such components for security support and complementing the government security apparatus, they must be fully motivated and they must be vetted. So I'm sure that one of the bedeviling situations in Nigeria is that the civilian joint task force can be infiltrated, the civilian joint task force can be weakened without the appropriate roles, which is intelligence gathering, because if they are used to combat armed insurgency, the weaponry they are holding will not be strong enough to meet that of the bandits or the terrorist group. So we need to refocus in Nigeria. We need to look towards continuity. We need to imbue training and motivation in the civilian joint force. And there must be the pursuit to use them to enrich the ranks. All of the police recruitment that has been going on right now, the DSS recruitment that have been going on, the EFCC recruitment, CPC recruitment, none of these civilian joint task force that I have had that have been given a quota because of what they have done over time. So these are the things that weakens it, and misappropriation of funding to actually give them the appropriate training and the gadgets and technological wherewithal to be able to deliver on their role.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was Roy Okidiefbie there, a security consultant and retired military officer. Moving on to other news now, to Nigeria's northeastern state of Borno, where electricity is gradually being restored in parts of the state. Several power installations, including a 330 kilovolt transmission line, were destroyed during a recent attack blamed on insurgents. CGTN's Kelechi Emeklem now reports.
Militant groups have been staging incessant attacks across the northeastern region, One of the attacks targeted electricity facilities along the Damboa-Maiduguri Road and the Damaturu-Maiduguri Road. They destroyed power installations, causing a total blackout within and around the Borno state capital, Maiduguri. Electricity workers have begun repairs to restore the light. Another incident occurred in the town of Ngala, close to the Cameroonian border. Terrorist groups targeted a humanitarian hub in the town. Aid workers have been providing assistance there to more than 55,000 people. Part of the building was burnt down alongside a UN vehicle. 5 UN staff escaped unhurt. The UN humanitarian coordinator in Nigeria, Edward Callon, who confirmed the attack, urged all parties to respect the humanity, neutrality and independence which guide the assistance of the humanitarian community in the region. Kelechi Amekalam, CGT and Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, Nigeria is stepping up efforts to achieve its Sustainable Development Goals. The United Nations is urging the West African nation to use a collaborative system of governance to reach its SDG targets. These goals include ending poverty by the year 2030. The government also hopes to achieve gender equality as well as affordable and clean energy for all. The UN Research and Training Agency highlighted the importance of collaborative leadership.
The SDG has 17 points, that the goal target, that you have to achieve by 2030. And so how do you achieve the SDG? The way to achieve the SDG is that every hands must be on deck. You have to begin to identify, with other, mandates of other agencies and so on, which is very, very important. You cannot work, in isolation of what is happening around the country. So to be able to achieve SDG, we need collaboration.
Now to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Friday marks 1 year since Felix Tshisekedi assumed the presidency. His election was the country's first peaceful transition of power since independence, but Congolese citizens have expressed mixed reactions about their leader's achievements.
The inauguration of President Felix Tshisekedi as the DRC's fifth leader was a change welcomed by many. Life had become difficult for many Congolese during the 18 years of former President Joseph Kabila due to widespread unemployment. Supporters of the president say they are satisfied with his first year in office.
He has built schools, hospitals, and stepped up the fight against Ebola. Cases of the deadly disease have reduced because of his support.
The president has been hailed for releasing political prisoners, allowing opposition politicians to hold demonstrations, and introducing free primary education.
DRC is back and in the right way. Today we are able to face and to represent, to set our country to the real dimension that our country deserves.
President Felix Tshisekedi has improved the DRC's relations with Western countries that had fallen out with his predecessor, Joseph Kabila, during his first year in office. But he still has a lot to do domestically to improve the welfare of his people. Some observers say not much has changed since the president took office last year.
Issues like corruption are still going on in our country, and the president made a mistake by dismissing a $15 million scandal as a commission in a TV interview.
The changes the president has been able to make so far have been lauded by some Congolese, but many of them are hoping to see his plan of improving their economic condition realized sooner rather than later. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including what China is doing to contain the spread of coronavirus pneumonia, and Egypt considering a raft of measures to preserve its critical fresh water resources.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out,
Go there and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Chinese mainland authorities have confirmed 17 deaths and 548 cases from the new coronavirus pneumonia. The vast majority of these cases, 444 in total, are in the central province of Hubei, where the virus originated. So far, the virus has been confirmed in 24 out of 34 provincial-level regions across the country. Hubei is also the origin of 7 overseas cases. Thailand has reported 4, and the United States, Japan and South Korea 1 each. Well, China says it will be transparent in releasing information related to the virus. The country's top health authority also said there will be national and international coordination in containing the outbreak. CGTN's Wu Guoxie reports now from China's State Information Office.
With well over 400 confirmed cases of pneumonia linked to the coronavirus in China, national efforts are underway to prevent further outbreaks.
The Chinese government and people are confident we can defeat the new epidemic and win this battle.
China's National Health Commission and 32 government departments have set up a new mechanism vowing effective coordination. Dealing of the epidemic will be carried out based on laws. People outside Wuhan are advised to avoid going there, and Wuhan residents are advised not to leave the city, but authorities say the warnings are not mandatory yet.
Next, we will continue to focus on Wuhan and strengthen the implementation of various prevention and control measures. At the same time, we will further strengthen nationwide prevention and control work, strictly implement the prevention and control measures during the Chinese New Year travel rush.
And they vow not to hide the truth. The nation's top health authority says they have released all key information in a timely manner and it vows to stay transparent.
We attach great importance to information disclosure, which is very important, in order to make the public timely, accurately and comprehensively understand the information. From January 20th, the National Health Commission began collecting and releasing the data of confirmed cases and suspected cases in all provinces of the country every day. It can be seen on the National Health Commission's website.
The authorities say China immediately reported the cases to countries including Russia, as well as Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan as many as 15 times. Information is being shared with technical departments and embassies of Thailand, Japan, South Korea, and the US. Free diagnostic reagents have been offered to Hong Kong and Macau. The nation has been keeping close contact with the World Health Organization from the beginning.
We have maintained close communication with the WHO, and we shared the whole gene sequence of the new coronavirus with the WHO at the beginning. We have set up a special team to organize in-depth exchanges between Chinese experts and the WHO's experts on the disease. At present, 4 expert communication meetings have been held, and WHO experts have been invited to Wuhan for on-the-spot investigation.
Authorities say so far there's no evidence of a super spreader like with SARS or MERS outbreaks in years past. One patient infected over 100 other people, and that's a key area of focus now. The top health authority has been publishing a daily data of confirmed cases in each province since Monday. They say there's a possibility that the virus might mutate and the epidemic might spread further, but they vow to stay transparent in releasing relative information in a timely manner. Wu Guoxiu, CGTN, Beijing.
On to Somalia now, where authorities backed by the United Nations have launched a humanitarian appeal. It's to tackle environmental shocks related to climate change in the Horn of Africa nation. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello now has more.
The 2020 humanitarian plan requires more than $1 billion to address recurrent climate-related shocks that continue to affect much of the country. The government of Somalia and its donor community say that the humanitarian response plan hopes to target more than 3 million vulnerable people affected by recent climatic shocks all across the country. 1.7 million people displaced by conflict, floods, drought and forced evictions will be targeted as part of this year's response plan. Recent desert locust infestation in parts of the country has also caused concerns among humanitarian agencies and agro-pastoralist communities living in south-central regions of the country.
The overall plan is a response to, unfortunately, the climatic shocks that we're facing, which are now compounded by the infestation of locusts in the country and in the region as a whole. They did come at the very end of the deer rainy season, so they don't seem to have a major impact on the harvest, but our fear is that they will remain in the country and have a toll on the goo harvest, which, if it is beneficial, we could see a major improvement in the numbers as far as people in need.
Up to 5.2 million people are reported to be in need of humanitarian support, up from 4.2 million last year.
My call to all of you, the government donors, member state, humanitarian and development partners, members of the press and the civil society, is to continue the outstanding work of giving a humanitarian hand where there is needed. Let us work together to save lives today and also restore stability to the country.
In recent years, aid partners say cash incentive is being used to allow poor families address immediate needs. In 2011, more than 250,000 people are believed to have died following a severe famine that displaced millions. Experts now say that key lessons have been learned from previous natural disasters.
Cash has become a much more important part of the overall response, not just in food security, but across other clusters as well, such as shelter and water.
Meanwhile, displaced families are returning back to their homes and farms following recent floods. Authorities have been urged to increase resilience among farmers and pastoralists to avoid future displacement. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Now to Egypt, where the population growth rate is among the highest in the world, and it's having a big impact on the level of water consumption. Annually, the country needs more than 84 billion cubic meters to meet demand. Its water, mostly from the Nile, provides a little less than 60 billion. This has prompted the country to heavily invest in cutting waste and to increase its freshwater resources. Here's CGTN's Adel El Makrouhi with more.
Before the sun rises, Salah Hussein wakes up for his daily duties. As a porter, he needs to make sure that all cars for his building of 20 apartments are clean. Washing cars have been one of the habits the Egyptian authorities have been cracking down to cut the water waste resulted. Soaking a piece of cloth in a half-a-gallon water bucket to wash them, Salah is a responsible citizen who uses the least volume needed to accomplish his mission.
On average, I use 3 buckets of water for about 22 cars. Sometimes I use 2 buckets of water. I have a brush which I use when the car is too dirty. I've been doing that even before the municipality issued its penalties on water use. The landlord here always instructs me to save water. When I used to spray the sheet with water, they'd yell at me and tell me we'll need that wasted water later.
Most people are not as aware as Salah, though. Egypt's natural resources of water make up about 60 billion cubic meters annually. The River Nile provides 55.5 of these. Currently, the country has a deficit of 24 billion cubic meters to cover its needs. So controlling water waste has always been a priority.
The government is now diminishing and regulating planting crops which consume immense volumes of water. We are expanding the usage of advanced irrigation methods. We are also introducing new gears for house usage, which have been a great success in dropping household consumption. Citizens have a major role to take, and the government is trying to monitor violations as much as possible.
The Egyptian government says it's allocating some $50 billion from water management until the year 2037. Investments have been pouring in desalination and recycling projects. Agriculture is the biggest challenge. It consumes about 85% of Egypt's water. Most of it is poorly managed.
Traditional irrigation systems, which are common in Egypt, could waste up to 40% of water depending on the crop. It's why Egypt is moving in an ambitious plan to shift them into modern sprinklers by the year 2030. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
12 tigers and 5 lions have been relocated to a sanctuary in South Africa after being rescued from circuses in Guatemala. They reportedly endured years of abuse and confinement. The animals are among 200 that have been rescued from the circus industry in Guatemala, Peru, Bolivia and Colombia since 2018. CGTN's Yulissa Njamela has more.
On their arrival at the OR Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg, the animals looked healthy but a little bit distressed, perhaps as a result of the long journey. According to animal rights group Animal Defense International, these animals have suffered tremendously. They lived in small cages on the backs of trucks their entire lives. The animals were rescued by animal rights group the Animal Defense International, or ADI. It's been an emotional journey for the group.
Originally, they were skin and bones. They were living on chicken feet, and they have all kinds of vitamin deficiencies. There's a few that walk really funny. We're hoping that we can get them to change their walk because they have literally neurological problems. They have dental problems. Some of them can't eat. They had their teeth taken, their fangs removed. Some had their toenails taken off. One of the lions had it done so badly that she ended up getting cancer of the paw.
For months, the ADI team stationed in South America, working with government officials to enforce a ban on animals in circuses that became law in 2018.
This is 18 months of really hard work in Guatemala, both tracking down the circuses, raiding them in pretty difficult circumstances. In terms of the flight itself, it's just an endurance challenge really, and the thing that keeps you going is knowing we're going to get these animals to the ADI Wildlife Sanctuary.
This is the new home for the animals. It's a 455 acres ADI Wildlife Sanctuary in the Free State Province here in South Africa.
South Africa has the space and it has the right environment, and most of the animals that we rescue from circuses are lions. Sometimes we get bears, sometimes other animals, but a lot of lions. And one of the things that we always wanted to do was bring them home to where they should have been left in the first place.
Krima says the rescue of these animals provides lessons for all of us.
One of the reasons that the campaign on animals in circuses is so important is that what we need to do on this planet is to learn to behave differently towards the other species who share our planet. They have as much right to be here as we do. This is their home. They're our neighbors on this planet. And we have to really start thinking about adjusting how we treat someone who doesn't look like us, doesn't live like us, doesn't speak the same language as us.
The ADI is already home to 26 lions due to the abuse that these animals have suffered and years of confinement. It's simply not possible for them to be released into the wild again. The animals will be freed into large natural enclosures of the African bush here at this wildlife sanctuary. Yulissa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, we are staying in South Africa. The Chinese community in Cape Town is celebrating the Year of the Rat. CGTN's Rennie Delcam has more on the New Year festivities.
Money in red envelopes to show appreciation. Traditional Chinese foods symbolizing abundance and wealth. And great pride in sharing the heritage and customs of the Spring Festival with the locals. The Chinese community in Cape Town welcomed the Year of the Rat with traditional good luck symbols of the new year.
With all these Chinese in Cape Town, where they come from,
Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan, Macau, and the local friends as well. We are so happy to get together to celebrate the Chinese New Year.
Although many in this Chinese community say they get very homesick for China during the Chinese New Year, they say they love celebrating this special time with their Chinese compatriots and their Cape Townian friends here in their newfound home in Cape Town, South Africa.
And as the Chinese Consul General here, we always encourage the Chinese citizens here to make contributions to the development of this city. So I think this celebration is also a good wish from the Chinese community for this city. And on behalf of the Chinese Consulate General, I also would like to say Happy New Year for all the Cape Town citizens. Happy Chinese Lunar Year of the Rat. And may the city of Cape Town a great success and a prosperity.
School kids in Cape Town's Chinese community who'd performed well in the past year were celebrated for their excellent performance. And members of the Chinese community who've worked hard to strengthen ties with Cape Townians were also honoured at this New Year event.
Doesn't matter where you came from, you can be from any ethnicity, any culture, as long as you celebrate this festival together, we should do it together. And it feels amazing to be here having traditional, delicious Southern Chinese foods. Yeah, I just feel blessed to be here.
The rat is the first animal in Chinese zodiac sign, and they're likable and lovable.
And they represent optimistic and energy. So we would like to wish everyone in 2020, in the year of the rat, to be healthy, wealthy, and to bring joy to their family.
Renat Al-Khan, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Let's now go to Panina for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Coming up on Africa Live Business. Zimbabwe doctors' strike ends after telecoms billionaires' intervention. And South African unions now lose hope on the National Carriers Rescue Plan.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Zimbabwe's junior doctors have agreed to return to work thanks to the intervention of a mobile telecoms mogul. Strive Masiyiwa will pay each doctor a subsistence allowance of about $300. Through his Higher Life Foundation, the Econet founder will also provide the doctors with transport to work. The move brings to an end one of Zimbabwe's longest strikes. Last September, doctors in the Southern African economy embarked on a 4-month walkout. This brought services in the country's major hospital to a standstill. The government doctors were pressing for wages to be pegged to the US dollar as a cushion against rising inflation in the worst economic crisis in a decade. Let's shift focus now to South African Airways. The national carrier has cancelled several domestic and international flights over the coming week. SAA is currently running short of cash. This comes after the government failed to provide a $137 million emergency funding it promised when the airline entered a form of bankruptcy protection last year. CGTN's Angela Coppola has more.
The airline has already used $140 million of funding and is waiting for an injection of a similar amount from the government, which is several weeks late.
Our members are feeling very worried, they're very anxious, and I think they have good reason to feel that way. It does seem very clear to us that this business rescue process is in jeopardy. In fact, as NUMSA and SACA, we've gone as far as saying that it's been sabotaged by both Treasury and the Ministry of Public Enterprises.
The Solidarity Union was responsible for preempting the decision by government to put SAA in voluntary liquidation. They aren't excited about the progress made thus far or the government's apparent lack of interest in raising the money needed.
And now we have Minister Mboweni still saying they don't know if they can find the funds. So why go through the routes? Why, if you don't have the money, why go through business rescue? So we're happy with the sort of signs that we see that finally we're in a radical restructuring process, but we're quite unhappy with the amount of influence that we think government is still exercising.
While the airline's future hangs in the balance, passengers are putting on a brave face.
Yes, it's quite a little bit of discomfort because I don't know whether when I get back I'll be able to get back home safely and in time. But hopefully, crossing fingers that when we get back, then we'll be able to fly back to South Africa. I'm hopeful that all these things they should be sorted out and SAA will be back on its feet.
The airline has seen its fair share of turnaround plans over the years, none of which have led to any substantial improvement in profitability or operating efficiency.
But we've never actually had the patient in surgery. We've always been giving Benados and Disprins for somebody who needs open heart surgery. Now we've got them on the slab. Now it's just to start cutting away the right pieces and making sure that the radical restructuring that is necessary actually takes place.
The unions say they're committed to the business rescue process and the plan that will emerge shortly because they don't have a choice.
Because if business rescue fails, it means that 10,000 workers and their families face job losses. And that is not something that as unions we can just simply accept. So we are putting all the pressure to bear on all of those who are responsible for the mess that they've created to force them to act in the interests of all of us.
The situation at SAA has become dire based on the fact that so many of those flights have been cancelled for the next 4 days, which leaves the crew on the ground and basically unemployed. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 at OR Tambo International Airport in South Africa.
Nigeria says it's working with all relevant stakeholders to address the country's growing power crisis. Last year alone, Nigeria's national grid experienced roughly 11 system collapses. Nearly half of Africa's most populous nation, mostly in rural areas, also remain completely in the dark. With more on this, here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam.
It's the 11th edition of this International Electricity Conference. Hundreds of stakeholders, investors and experts converge from around the world to discuss new ways of tackling the prevailing challenges in the sector. As the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria's persisting electricity crisis has hampered its economic growth, as the country still suffers a massive infrastructural deficit.
The government is aware of the need to enhance the infrastructure along the electricity value chain. Therefore, it is our focus to deflect the delta between the available capacity and what ends up being distributed by the distribution companies. Our drive is to particularly facilitate the implementation of the Presidential Power Initiative.
Despite a potential to generate over 12,000 megawatts of electricity, the country's generation capacity still hovers around an average 4,000 megawatts, grossly inadequate for its 200 million population, and clearly the national grid is no longer sustainable.
We're looking for more microgrid system that can touch all lives, whether in the rural area or in the urban area. Hence, we also thought the grid of the future must be the grid that has the ability to think. The ability to think, ability to react, ability to self-clear the faults, ability to reconfigure itself.
In 2019 alone, the national grid experienced 11 system collapses and one this year. Over 80 million Nigerians, mostly in rural areas, still do not have access to electricity. So issues of availability, affordability and infrastructural deficit dominate discussions here. And ultimately, the country is talking diversification of energy sources.
We want a power that is flexible. We don't want to depend on only one source of power. We need power that comes from the wind. We need power that comes from cold. We need power that comes from solar. We need power that comes from water. So that at the end of the day, the hybridization of this power allow us to make a choice.
Authorities say the alternative mini-grid system has become imperative. It would be a public-private partnership endeavor. It aims to not only light up the country, but to also drive economic growth and development. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
20 years ago, the international community came together to set itself a series of targets. This included sustainable development goals to improve the lives of millions of people around the world. The number one target was to cut absolute poverty to 3% of the world's population by 2030. Millions of people around the world have been raised out of poverty in the past few decades, but it's not yet clear whether the 2030 target will be met. CGTN's Catherine Drew reports.
Almost 50 years ago, this man founded the World Economic Forum in Davos to improve the state of the world. Today, he is still talking about the need to create wealth.
The best way to foster a more cohesive and inclusive society is to provide everybody with a decent job and income.
Since the first World Economic Forum in 1971, the world's poor, classed as those living on less than $1.90 a day, has fallen from around 2 billion to under 600 million.
Over the last 50 years, the world has experienced an unprecedented moment of collective growth. What we've seen in Asia has been a sustained period of considerable reforms by the two largest countries, not only in the region but in the world, China and India, each pursuing its own package of reforms, but ultimately leading to the same very impressive success rates.
Chris Hamill is part of the World Poverty Clock project. It tracks real-time data to calculate exactly how many of the world's population are in poverty right now and at what rate that number is going down.
This project started 4 years ago, and you can see in 2016, 668 million people were living in extreme poverty. If you scroll forward just 4 years, that number changes to 591 million people.
Large parts of South America are on track to meet the Sustainable Development Goal on poverty, seen here in green, as are many countries in Asia. Africa is making progress, but conflicts, fast-growing populations, weaker economic growth and less robust governments have all hindered a faster rate of change.
More than 100 million people will escape poverty over the next 10 years. That's certainly a success by any measure. The question is, how quickly can resources be focused, channeled, how quickly can development projects be designed in just a handful of countries to really be able to push the needle?
As world leaders gather in Davos, the World Poverty Clock continues to tick in the right direction. But just how fast it keeps ticking down is now the key question. Catherine Drew, CGTN.
We'll leave it there for now, but coming up on Global Business, uproar in Angola after the hyped Luanda leaks detailing Isabel dos Santos' rise to riches through political patronage and alleged corruption. I'll have details of that story, plus many more at the top of the hour. For now, it's back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Vanina. We are going to a break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including... We bring you the highlights from an exhilarating breakdancing festival in Niger.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Chinese government has completed the upgrades of a local children's home and educational facility in Zimbabwe. CGTN's Brian Toussaint has more on this welfare project.
This is the Hosanna Children's Home. It's located in the Zimbabwean capital of Harare. The facility has been undergoing much-needed upgrades in the past 2 months. The Chinese embassy and the local business community extended a helping hand.
The newly refurbished children's home and primary school will be of great importance as it will give the children adequate facilities for proper living and proper education, minimizing the gap between the advantaged and disadvantaged children.
The refurbished educational facility and dormitory will benefit over 20 orphaned children. The Chinese community here has also been making monthly donations to the facility in the form of food, books, and cash. The upgrading of the facilities will go a long way in bridging the gap between advantaged and disadvantaged children in society and in creating a conducive learning environment.
We are showing Zimbabwe this kind of love, not because we are rich, but because we are friends, and because we know fully well that we are living in an increasingly interdependent world in which no country can go ahead alone. In this global village, we are all neighbors. We all need to help and support each other, and this project is as a result of that.
The Chinese government is promoting people-to-people exchanges by investing in their livelihoods. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Niger's capital, Niamey, has hosted its second breakdancing festival, and there was lots to dazzle. Let's now take a look.
Dancers gathered in Niamey to break it down. They came from Togo, Cameroon, Benin, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Ghana, France, and Niger. B-boys and B-girls dazzle spectators with their skills.
I often see this kind of dancing on TV with some of the stars, and there they are in front of me with stars from several countries of the sub-region. There are even 2 French dance stars that are here at this festival. Our wish is that this festival should be organized regularly.
The event also looked to encourage more Nigerians to take part in breakdancing.
It is a festival that aims to motivate breakdancers here in Niger. The festival is also international because it welcomes dancers from several countries. The objective is to encourage dancers to get more involved in the field.
Part of Niger's society remain conservative, with some discouraging girls against dancing. The festival, in response, organized a special session targeting girls and women.
There was a workshop especially for women. We introduced them to hip-hop dance and we taught them fundamentals.
From international acts to a chance to let loose, this breakdancing festival had lots to offer. Asta Tal, CGTN.
We've got all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including Africa holds its 2022 FIFA World Cup preliminary qualification round draw.
How would you create